So if I had known you when I stood online for 3 hours to buy my niece a Cabbage Patch Kid, I could have called you up and used the connection, so 20 years too late. So Alan and I don't know each other, but I think we must have known each other in another life, because when he called me yesterday, we talked for about 30 seconds, figured out that we had some kind of energy connection, and we knew what this conversation was going to be. So you're all going to be hearing something that's in our minds at the moment. But you know, one of the things I wanted to say before I ask you some questions is that I've been here all day, and I've been listening to a lot of speakers talk about sort of innovation in coming from different perspectives. And one of the things that became clear to me, whether it was Tanya or the gentleman from Cathay Pacific, or even something that Rachel said earlier, that you know, innovation and change can happen through corporations. And so if you had told me 10 years ago, after a career in not-for-profit and government, that I would be in corporate philanthropy, I would have laughed you out of the room, because I didn't think there was any potential there to be involved with change or programs or sort of make a difference. And I think that we've heard today, that's just a new environment, a new world today. And so sitting next to me is sort of one of the pioneers of that sort of business and what we were laughing about yesterday, shared values. We don't even know what that means, but really thinking about, you know, I run the Blackstone Charitable Foundation, and our CEO decided when he started the foundation that we would do something that was aligned with what we do for a living, so we could leverage the assets, just like Cathay Pacific and Possible. For those of you who were there this morning, I mean, it was a simple little idea they had where they had no money, but they had airplanes, and how they could bring these medical supplies to countries in need. It's a simple thing, but it's leveraging your assets to make a difference and solve for a problem. And so, you know, you really were a pioneer, and we realized yesterday, I had run the 9/11 fund a couple of years ago, and Hasbro was a partner in a lot of the work that was done in 9/11 and the rebuilding of the Lower Manhattan. So tell us a little bit about what your vision was and what was the mission of Hasbro, and before there was shared values.
Well, I think before that I'd say I never ever want to get on a stage and follow Tanya.
I know.
I mean, that is, you know, that's
I meant
ridiculous.
to say that. I mean, it's a hard act to follow.
It's not fair. I mean, you know, and I was very upset. We mentioned Game of Life. If we're going to talk toys for a minute, remember, Potato Head made me tell you that there are 200 days left before Christmas. So when you leave tonight, don't go to cocktails. Go to your favorite toy store. Anyway, let me be serious for a minute. There are a couple things, Amy, that I think we were fairly instrumental in. Number one, always believed in something called the triple threat, you know, when you're dealing with a corporation. And the triple threat basically is, number one, philanthropy that you give out. Number two, giving in kind. And in our case, it's very easy. You make toys, you're giving to orphanages, you're giving to children in distress during the holidays. But the third one, which was incredibly important to us, so I think we were one of the first, if not the first company, to give our people 4 hours paid per month to do volunteer work. Because unless you get your people involved, you don't retain them. And the other thing that has really grown with me is, you know, all of us in business face this quote by Milton Friedman, "The business of business is business." It's not true. If you've ever read Candide, you're supposed to cultivate your own garden and plant the seeds. And so what I passionately believe in, and Hasbro follows through on today, is something called tangential philanthropy. In the old days, a CEO or a CEO's wife would say, let's be recognized in the community and let's give to this art museum and, you know, be the big social givers. No. Corporations or companies with a soul have got to give tangentially, and that means to something that's tied to their business. Obviously, the oil companies, if they'd wake up, can basically spend a great deal of time on environmental issues and climate warming. Not that everybody believes there's climate warming, but we're not here to talk about that. But tangential giving for me and in my people is really Hasbro's probably the easiest because we deal with families and we deal with children. And so, and very importantly, you've got to give back to the communities that you live in. Because if you have good schools, if you have good medical care, you will attract good people. And the more that you communicate to your people all of the different programs, you know, I see a couple of my friends in the audience, whether it's Grab the Torch, whether it's Year Up, whether, you know, City Years. There are so many incredible programs that not only can you be involved in helping financially, but your people can get involved. And it's amazing when your people, you know, get involved.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I run one of these corporate philanthropies, and I think part of the problem is, you know, Blackstone, we're focused on entrepreneurship, which is totally aligned with what the employees of the firm and our portfolio companies do. They can support startup companies by giving them business advice or whatever it is. And we leverage that. And it's something that actually excites the employees because they feel it's what they know. It's not charitable, like you said, giving to the art museum. But I think one of the problems, and now that I'm on the other side of the table, one of the problems is the inundation with all kinds of, you know, we support Year Up. Every organization you just mentioned, we support in some way or another, mostly through our service programs. But how do you, you know, how do you navigate that? And again, I think because you were a pioneer, in some ways it was easier for you, but some of the corporations out there, and I would say that the sort of more traditional corporate America corporations or financial services firms, how do you think they should navigate that, you know, world of endless not-for-profits that they...
Well, when we deal with...
Solve everybody's problems.
When we deal with the, you know, the civil society, the NGOs, the 501c3s, first of all, I think we have a serious problem there. I think that there are... Everybody goes out and with their heart and purpose to make a difference, but too many organizations are overlapping.
Right.
And we have too many not-for-profits because nobody wants to give up any of their territory. And so after a while, you have to make some very hard decisions. Which AIDS fund am I going to give to? You know, if they would all put, if Bill and the Global Business Alliance and the Clinton Foundation, if they'd all put them partly together, boy, could we make a huge difference and stop wasting money. But it's hard because I've never been good at really saying no. But, you know, right now with some of the pressures, you know, I'm under because we're building a children's hospital at NYU now. That's the family. And we've just set up a Center for Pediatric Innovation at Brown to study autism, asthma, and obesity/nutrition, because what most people don't realize is when you take something like anorexia, bulimia, it's growing. And many times families don't want to talk about these things, but these are hardcore things. We're also basically, interestingly enough, Amy, we have so many problems or opportunities here in the United States. And we've decided that we're going to focus more and more of our dollars on trying to handle some of the issues here. I mean, like Steve and Steve Schwartzman, who's got this wonderful scholarship program with 100 students in China, which is really important because we have to get more and more of our American students to understand other cultures. Too often, we as Americans put our value, we preach to other countries. We put our values, our culture, our religion on them when we have no right to preach unless we understand their values, their history, and their culture. If the world would if we all would wake up and understand history, half of the problems we're seeing around the world today wouldn't be there. But again, we're fighting more and more to find programs. They could be small programs because I love passionate entrepreneurs, or they could be larger programs to fund, but within the United States. And the other thing we do not do much of Amy, is I'm not the most passionate person when it comes to endowment. And the reason I say that is how much endowment is enough? And I've actually been in a situation where this one philanthropy drew down their normal 5% a year, but they were feeding children. And they ran out of money from that year. I mean, they had a huge endowment, but they had run out of the 5% that they draw every year. What do you tell the children? Come back next year if you're alive? So basically, I've decided that the first day of the future is today. You don't walk into the future, you create the future. And so we want to be part of creating the future.
So I'm going to push you a little bit on this question of, you know, what you said before about too many 501c3s, because when I was involved in the 9/11 work, one of the things that was so interesting was that all the corporations got together because of that terrible terrorist attack, and got together representing every industry and leveraged whatever their expertise, their assets, whether it was Hasbro with toys or a head of a large advertising agency giving free marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Every industry, the Hollywood industries came out and did all of that work. And it was a collaboration at that moment in response to something. And I really am, like you, very concerned about this endless kind of, a little bit, I don't know if Tanya was really talking about this, but I was thinking about, it's a little bit of this startup thing. Every kid, we have incubators on 21 college campuses around the country, the Blackstone Charitable Foundation, and sometimes I think to myself, you go around these college campuses, regardless of whether they're elite schools or community colleges, and kids are starting the same kinds of businesses. And one of the things we did was we built a platform where the kids can all be on the platform. So if you're at USC and I'm at University of Central Florida, and we had this, actually, it's a specific example where one kid had built a prosthetic limb with a 3D printer at USC, and another kid had done the same thing at University of Central Florida. One did it as a not-for-profit, and one did it as a for-profit venture. But on the platform, they got together and they've collaborated now. And if you could do that with these not-for-profits, and you didn't really answer the question of, as you're navigating it, I mean, not that you necessarily have the answer, but I think part of what's going on now is it's a transformational moment where corporations are really getting involved in philanthropy in a meaningful way and tying it to their, to their work that they do. And really, like you said, this tangential philanthropy, which is a big change from 20 years ago, except, you, like I said, were a pioneer. So how do corporations, I see this everywhere I go. I sit on councils, and, a lot of corporations are struggling with this, but how do you identify those not-for-profits? If you're in the space of children, how do you know to give to this one and not this one? How do you actually suss that out?
Well, number one, we're very fortunate. We have a small team at Hasbro run by a sensational lady who's been there a number of years, Karen Davis. And Karen really does do, you really have to ask a lot of questions because in some cases, the truth is not always on the surface. We've just faced this huge problem in Rhode Island where our legislature has been giving grants for years. Problem is, they never did any due diligence. And unless you're willing to basically ask questions, I'm not talking about the $10,000 grant, which sometimes as seed money is more important than $1 million grant. But when it comes to a larger grant, we are constantly asking questions. I want to know, does your board give? What is your sustainability? And I know people question, how can you on a startup program or how can you in some of these programs look at metrics? But I'd like to know if we're giving for 2 or 3 years, what should I be looking for? What does success or moving the bar at least, what does it mean? And I get very, very worried that sometimes we keep giving to the same organization and they become almost like a drug addict. Because my family foundation goes dry after 3 years. And we warn people that after 3 years, don't look at us. because we need people to become sustainable, because if we're the only ones keeping them sustainable, that's a problem. Because look, we all look at all of the different issues that we're faced with out there, and they change. I was staggered by the number on autism. If you go back 20, 25 years ago, 1 in 14,000 kids was diagnosed with autism. Today, 1 in 40, at least. And so when I say sometimes your priorities have to change. What are we doing about after-school programs? What are we doing about midnight basketball? What are we doing about the programs that work? Okay, those are the ones that we have to basically take to the next level. And by the way, we have to shoot the stragglers and get rid of them. Does that help?
Yeah, that's good. It's good enough.
That's not good. If I'm a good CEO, you're not supposed to answer the question.
So we have just a little bit of time left, and I'd say that I just wanted to say after this day today, one of the things that I learned today just listening to the X Prize, the gentleman from X Prize and Cathay Pacific, and just everybody who spoke, you know, social innovation to me, that the meaning of it has actually expanded today to mean a lot. Every speaker today sort of gave kind of a new definition to social innovation, and it's been, you know, quite interesting and transformative for me. And so I just, you know, would like to ask you, as your parting words, what does social innovation mean to you?
I don't know. No.
Make it up.
I mean, I will. Oh, of course I will. First of all, I use the word much more ideation. You know, it's the idea. Every idea is a great idea. You talk it out and it leads to the next, to the next, to the next, and that leads to your innovation. We're playing with the word innovation, but I'm going to change the subject for a second, because we've talked philanthropy, but at the same point in time, we haven't really talked sustainability. And there are many companies, and I love what we're doing on sustainability in our carbon footprint, but is that philanthropy? In one sense, it's not. In one sense, it is. But for a toy company in children's entertainment, and I say that because it's a higher stock value if you're in children's entertainment and own content.
That's the business.
Ideation and innovation is our lifeblood. Every single toy that you see every year, you might have played with My Little Pony, you might have played with Easy Bake Oven, The Game of Life, Monopoly, Transformers, but every year they are transformed with new clothes. Because if you do not innovate, the kids or the millennials of today get very bored very quickly. So for me, social innovation, I just like the word innovation. Just do something. You know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Many of us in this room still live with that proverb, and we got to get rid of it. You got to get yourself in a position to be able to do things differently if you want to make change and social innovation happen. At least I ended up on the right words.
That's good. Thank you.